All right, good evening, church. Tonight we're going to continue our study with Joseph. Joseph, the great grandson of Abraham. We're in week 6 of our study, and in case you're new here or visiting, I'll just take a few extra moments right now and catch us all up to speed so that we're familiar with the story and what's going on. We began our study with Joseph in week 1, talking about how this story that we read in the Bible, it is undeniably true. Undeniably true. And we talked about how if the story, as we see in the Bible, really did happen, this idea of a Hebrew becoming the vizier of Egypt, second in charge under Pharaoh himself, if this really does take place and Joseph really does save Egypt through incredible foresight and effort, through a devastating famine and all that takes place, then there would be clear memory in Egypt, especially since we have so much on Egypt archaeologically speaking, and ancient records and all that. In fact, we have so much on Egypt, you would assume that it's there, and it is there. It is there. So week 1, we looked at some of the archaeology there. Next week, we're going to spend another week on archaeology. We're going to talk a lot about that next week as we go into the next phase of Joseph's time here. But we looked at, we saw his palace, we saw his tomb, his Egyptian tomb before his body was moved to Shechem. We saw the statue that was made of him. There's a reconstruction of that statue on the screen here. Joseph, we know what he looks like because those who knew him built this highest quality statue. And you're thinking, when I see reconstructed statues, I can tend a little bit towards skepticism. But I've also seen the real pieces, and you really can see all the paint fragments, and I mean they're not small chunks. These are big chunks, and yeah, it's a very accurate and easily reconstruct. I mean, the pieces are big and the paint is still there. So that's what Joseph looked like, and made by people who knew him. So we talked about this, and we looked at the facts, and for some of us, when we were looking at this, we're like, oh man, our mind is blown. I had no idea that there was so much in the ground. There is so much more, and we're going to talk about that next week. So we talked about that and how this is a true story, which is great. It sets us up for our study here. And then we started going through the Bible week after week and talking about different episodes in his life, and how it begins with Joseph in one of the world's most messed up families. As some of you know what it's like to be raised in a messed up family. Well, Joseph has got a terrible situation. His mom dies when he's young, and then he's raised by 3 stepmothers. Okay, that is like a Disney movie times 3, right? 3 stepmothers all at the same time. And the thing with these stepmothers is that they've got 2 issues with Joseph. Issue number 1, that Joseph is loved by the father of the home, Jacob. Joseph is loved more than their own kids. All right, so that's kind of awkward. And then the second thing is Joseph's mother, Rachel, was loved much more than all 3 of these stepmothers combined, and so that's also awkward. So he's raised in this dynamic, and if that's awkward, then you also have his brothers, and it's way more obvious in the Bible with his brothers, because his brothers' hatred, at least his 10 older brothers' hatred of him, is crazy powerful, so much so that once Joseph continues to be promoted in the home, and he receives this coat of many colors, and he is getting these dreams, and he's sharing them with his brothers. They eventually get so angry with Joseph that they want to kill him, and they're pretty determined to do that. And they throw him in a pit, except for they get another opportunity. They get the opportunity to sell him into permanent, multi-generational slavery. Their expectation is that once they sell Joseph here, then he is gone, and gone forever for all generations and all time. They believe that this is just evil, evil stuff, selling their brother into multi-generational slavery. Now, it says in the Bible that the selling price for Joseph is 20 pieces of silver. 20 pieces of silver. Now, you may read past that and think, oh, that is what it is. But actually, that is one of those very many things throughout the Bible that just scream this is true. That just scream of the historical realities, the historicity of the events that we're reading about. Are we okay with historicity? Did that pass as a word? Okay, we're taking it. There's lots of people who write about even just the 20 pieces of silver, like Egyptologist James Hoffmeyer. He writes about the 20 pieces of silver and as one of those things that verifies not only the historicity, which I'm going to stick with, of the Bible here, but it is a real word. Yes, it's legit. Okay, so not only is it, okay, it's legit. Okay, I'm loving this. Okay. But also the improbability of the Bible being written a millennium later. There, you will have heard this idea of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy being written like 1,000 years later and not by Moses. Well, it's some of these little facts that just make those theories so implausible. And so a lot of scholars who believe in God and who don't believe in God, agnostics as well, like David Rawl, just unable to believe that this idea of these words being recorded 1,000 years later, because in Joseph's day, according to the timeline of the Bible, in Egypt, we have lots of external evidences and documents that say, yes, the slave rate, the price of a slave in Egypt in that time was 20 pieces of silver. But if you go just a little bit further in time, like Moses' day, then you're getting to 30 pieces of silver. And if you get to David's day, you're getting to 50 pieces of silver as the going slave rate. And by the time you get to the day that some would propose, in the Babylon period, like the David time or later, you're getting to 120 pieces of silver as a slave rate, and people are just like, there is no way they're gonna just know the going rate of a slave a millennium before in Egypt, all those years and centuries ago. So it's just one of those little facts that seem like a small deal, but just scream, this is true, and it was recorded, and it's intended to be received as accurate. So there's that. And he sold it to a slave into Potiphar's home, says the Bible. This is his Egyptian name would be Potipari. Now, some of these names and dates, if they're unfamiliar to you, I'm getting them today from David Rawl. David Rawl is an agnostic. He doesn't believe in the God of the Bible, and yet he's an Egyptologist, and he writes about the discoveries of things such as the things in Joseph's stories and the Exodus and events like that. He's a pretty big deal. He's had lots of positions of significance, presidents of this Egypt society and president of that and author and all that kind of stuff. So David Rawl, he's the one that has pointed out some of these names to me. So the Egyptian name being Potipari, who was the commander of the army of Ra, or Re if you're Egyptian, Ra, the sun god, based out of a city called Iona, or On, would be how it's referred to in the Bible. The Greeks later called it Heliopolis, city of the sun. He was also the high priest of the Ben stone in Iona. The Ben stone. Let's go worship the Ben stone. No, let's not do that. Let's worship the real God, the God of the Bible. That's right, yeah. Oh, anyways. So that's him. And he's also governor of the royal state prison in Memphis. So that's Potiphar, this guy that Joseph sold to. So a very significant deal. I mean, it does say he's captain of the guard and all this kind of stuff, but he's a very, very high-ranking official in Pharaoh's domain here. Over time, Joseph, the slave, he rises in rank and becomes a senior steward of Potiphar or Potipari's home, and that lasted until Potiphar's wife, whose name apparently was Nofret. And Nofret, I find that name entirely ironic in English. Her name was Nofret. If she's Australian, no worries, or something like that. But so she causes all sorts of fret in Joseph's life. And basically, Nofret is much younger. She's much younger than her powerful, wealthy husband. And she develops this infatuation with senior steward Joseph and keeps pressuring him to sleep with her, which wasn't sleeping. And one day, Joseph's alone in the house, and she brings the pressure. She brings the pressure. There's no one else in the house, and she brings the pressure. And so he runs, and he leaves his coat of many colors behind, and no fret accuses Joseph of attempted rape. And the penalty of that is very simple. It is death. For a slave, no matter the rank, to do such a thing to an Egyptian woman, especially whose husband is Potiphar, the sentence is so simple, it's the death penalty. But it seems that Potiphar, or Potipari, or however you want to call him, apparently Potiphar doesn't entirely believe his wife's story. In fact, the Bible says he's mad and he's angry and he throws him in prison. But that's a little bit of okay, then wait, why was he mad again? I mean, did he believe his wife or did he not believe his wife? Because Joseph doesn't receive the death penalty. Instead, he's thrown into Potiphar's prison, the great prison in Memphis there, and he's left there indefinitely, but he's not executed. So he's there maybe 5 years, maybe 9 years or something like that. We don't know exactly how long he was in prison. But after a significant period of time in prison, he rises again. He raises in rank, I think is the right word. Rises, risen, resification. And he goes up in rank and until he continues to prove himself trustworthy. And then ultimately, he is appointed as a personal attendant of some new, highly significant prisoners. The chief baker and the cupbearer, which we talked about last week. And while he is their personal attendant in the great prison here in Memphis, in the royal prison where Pharaoh's prisoners are, they have dreams. And we talked about this. And they have two dreams, and Joseph is able to accurately interpret each one. And now, the thing that we were, first of all, reminded of about these prisoners having dreams is that God, well, he speaks through dreams, but more crazy enough, God doesn't just speak through or to super Christians. Sometimes we think, well, God might speak to that person, but he's not going to speak to someone like me. Well, here is a great example of God not only not speaking to super Christians, or not even Christians at all. These guys don't even believe in Yahweh, the God of the Bible. Okay? Unbelievers. And they're not even world rulers. They're just prisoners, and one of them is about to die. And so you've got this God speaking. Now, they don't understand it, because they don't understand. They don't understand, but God is speaking. God is speaking. And my encouragement to you, if you don't classify yourself as a super Christian or whatever tonight, or you're feeling far away from God, to keep this idea in your mind. God is speaking. God is speaking. And I believe he's going to be speaking to you tonight, during this time, during the music, during the teaching. He's going to be nudging you. And I just encourage you to listen. And if you have doubts like these prisoners did, like, I think God might be speaking, but I don't know, talk to someone in this room who is a Christian, who has the Spirit of God, and be like, is this God? Is this God? And they can help you. See, I just promoted all of you into people who understand when God's speaking. Okay, so that's going on here. So we're going to dive in now that we're caught up to speed, to Genesis chapter 41. That's our next chapter here. And again, there's a lot about dreams, and we're not going to talk a lot about all of that today, but we're diving in, and basically, Joseph has been forgotten. He's been forgotten. The cupbearer is released, and then the last three words are about Joseph. It says, he forgot him. The cupbearer forgot Joseph. Joseph had begged him to get him out of here, but the cupbearer forgot. Let me start chapter 41. And I'm going to read for a little bit. This is an amazing story and significant, not only in the Bible and in Joseph's life, but for the history of Egypt, actually. 2 years later, Pharaoh had a dream. So Joseph's been in prison 2 years since working with these other two people, the chief baker and the cupbearer. 2 years later, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing beside the Nile when 7 healthy-looking well-fed cows came up from the Nile and began to graze among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, sickly and thin, came up from the Nile and stood beside those cows along the bank of the Nile. The sickly, thin cows ate the healthy, well-fed cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep and dreamed a second time. 7 heads of grain, plump and ripe, came up on one stalk. After them, 7 heads of grain, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 plump, ripe ones. Then Pharaoh woke up, and it was only a dream. It was only a dream. Of course, how many people are thinking, oh yeah, grain eating grain. Yeah, that's not a dream. No, okay, it was only a dream. Whew, because I thought that was real. Anyways, verse 8. When morning came, he was troubled. So he summoned all the magicians of Egypt, and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I remember my faults. Cupbearer, very big deal. Remember, Nehemiah is also a cupbearer in the Persian kingdom. Today I remember my faults. Pharaoh had been angry with his servants, and he put me and the chief baker in the custody of the captain of the guard. He and I had dreams on the same night. Each dream had its own meaning. Now a young Hebrew, a slave of the captain of the guards, was with us there. We told him our dreams. He interpreted our dreams for us, and each had its own interpretation. It turned out just the way he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged. Then Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and they quickly brought him from the dungeon. He shaved, changed his clothes, and went to Pharaoh. By the way, Joseph is one of the few Hebrews who lives most of his life cleanly shaven. The philosophy of shaving, if there is such a thing, between Egyptians and Hebrews are the exact opposite. Egyptians shaved themselves clean unless they were in a time of grieving. Then they would grow out their beards. The Hebrews would grow out their beards unless they were in a time of grieving. Then they would shave it off. Funny enough, Egyptians, maybe the young hip, the trendy ones, I don't know, the yuppies or whatever the case, they stick on fake ones. I don't know, just trying to be cool. Who wouldn't wear fake beards to be cool? But anyways, so we're off topic. So anyways, okay, so he was shaven. Where's that? There we go, okay. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I've had a dream. No, not quite like that, but I've had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said about you that you can hear a dream and interpret it. I am not able to, Joseph answered Pharaoh. It is God who will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile when 7 well-fed, healthy-looking cows came up from the Nile and began to graze among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly, very sickly and thin, came up. I have never seen such ugly ones as these in all of the land of Egypt. Ugly heifers here. So then the thin, ugly cows ate the first 7 well-fed cows, again, cannibal cows. When they had devoured them, you could not tell that they had devoured them. Their appearance was as bad as it had been before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I had also seen 7 heads of grain, plump and ripe, coming up on one stalk. After them, 7 heads of grain, withered thin, and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up. The thin heads of grain swallowed the 7 plump ones. I told this to the magicians, but no one can tell me what it means. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he, God, is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 ripe heads are 7 years. The dreams mean the same thing. The 7 thin, ugly cows that came up After them are 7 years. And the 7 worthless scorched heads of grain are 7 years of famine. It's just as I told Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt. After them, 7 years of famine will take place, and all the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten. The famine will devastate the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows it, for the famine will be very severe. Since the dream was given twice to Pharaoh, it means that the matter has been determined by God, and he will carry it out soon. All right, we're gonna pause there. There's so much there on dreams, and we talked about dreams last week. If you weren't here, you can see that online, and you can. But since we've been talking about it briefly, just quick reminders. Again, we see here the dreams here, the weird dreams. You got cannibal cows. You've got cannibal grains. You've got grain eating grain. And I think that this is the first warning in the Bible pertaining to the dangers of gluten that we see here. And so if you're into that, there you go. Beware of skinny whole grains. Anyway, so we remember that just because a dream is weird, that doesn't mean it's not a God dream. All right, we talked about that. We see down in verse 16 a very important point. Joseph once again attributing dream understanding not to a book, not to a scroll, but to God. It's God who will give Pharaoh, it says, a favorable answer. God will give him a favorable answer, and that's an interesting response from Joseph. It gives you some insight. Joseph has learned something about dreams over his life, that the answers are good, that if God is speaking, that there is an encouragement there, even though technically, as you're looking at the dream, you're seeing famine. The land will be devastated. It won't remember the good years. You could look at this dream and think, oh man, this is a bad dream. But Joseph understands what his God is like. And God has an encouragement to give to Pharaoh because of this dream. See, the thing is, God loves people, the work of his hand. And he loves to let people know what he's going to be doing so that if they'll listen, they can be helped. As believers, we understand that in the end days, in those last days, it's going to be rough. And we're not to be worried about that because God has marked us. God's marked us. He's paying attention. He encourages us to stand strong in those days, to be overcomers, to persevere to the end. And so we hear some troubling news about the days ahead, but we're to be encouraged because God knows what's going to happen, and we know what the end's going to be like. And we know that whatever we live through, God is still God, and He's still in control. So we get to see that. But so even in this bad message, this bad news message, famine is coming because God is good, because God is merciful, because God is gracious. He is giving Pharaoh a warning. He's giving Pharaoh a warning so that he can prepare to save the nation if he will listen and respond. If he'll listen and respond to what God is saying to him. I think this is just such a great example of seemingly bad news, seemingly bad dreams, still containing messages of hope from God. Still containing messages of hope. Another comment on dream interpretation is Joseph's response here. In the British Museum, there is some papyri. There's a papyrus from Egypt called the Chester Beatty papyrus, which talks about, and I think there's a picture here, so let me just translate it for you. It basically says that here's how dream interpretation works here in the land of Egypt. It's an old document. Obviously it's an old document. That was dumb. I'm so sorry. That was insulting. Okay, I'll rework it here. But basically, it talks about how in ancient Egypt, if you had a dream, you could go to the temple on the way to work, and you could say, "Hey, priest, I had a dream, and here's basically what it was." And he would flip through his scrolls, and he'd flip through the books or whatever scrolls, and he would look for a dream very similar, and he'd say, "Well, this is a very similar dream, and so your dream basically means similar. It means something like this." And so you could get that on your way to work. basically dreams were sorted into good outcome and bad outcome. There was two classifications of dreams, and so here we can see that whatever Pharaoh's dreams were, they weren't in the scrolls. And he summoned all of the priests from all of the temple, all of the wise men of the land. And so they're bringing in all the scrolls, and none of them know what Pharaoh's dreams mean. And yet this cupbearer remembers that Joseph didn't need a scroll. He didn't need a manual. He didn't need a book. Instead, he had this ability to hear from God, the author of dreams, the giver of dreams, and bring the interpretation. So Joseph shows up, and he brings this good outcome if paid attention to. This message of a good outcome. Again, we also remember that we can see all throughout this the details and how, once again, isolating the details have different meanings. 7 cows, 7 years, 7 heads of grain, 7 years. Okay. So that's just a basic recap, but we have a whole message about that last week, about understanding dreams and as God's speaking. The main thing, though, that I wanted to point out in this section is just from the first 3 words, actually. The first 3 words are very painful words for Joseph, who's a prisoner. And they're simply this: 2 years later. 2 years later. That's a very simple way to remind you of a lot of pain. 2 years later. Joseph has had loads of pain in his life, right? His brothers hated him. His Potiphar's wife lied about him. Now you've got this cupbearer, and he's plain forgot about him. He just forgot about Joseph. All painful stuff, but then there's one more thing. There's the pain of waiting. The pain of waiting year after year with very little hope. The pain of waiting. If you've ever had to wait without, like, indefinitely, it's excruciating. I mean, maybe if you understand, like, if I just wait a few more months, then things will be better. But if you don't have an end date, if you just are waiting and it's just waiting and waiting and waiting, it is painful stuff. Do you know someone who lives their life with very little hope? With very little hope that things will get better, maybe with a lot of pain. Do you know someone who lives life with just a lot of pain and with a lot of disappointments? Who look at their life and like, this isn't my fault, but it's horrible. Like, my life is horrible, and it's not really my fault. Things have been done to me. Maybe I'm feeling trapped. I'm feeling trapped with no way out. At least no way out that they can manage themselves. Friends, in this world, there's lots of pain here. There's lots of pain here. There's lots of reasons to feel like giving in to despair. There's lots of reasons to feel like giving in to depression and giving up hope. Joseph felt like there was a chance for him to get out. Like, maybe this is the moment God's going to use to get me out of prison. And he tells the cupbearer, don't forget about me. Mention me. I don't deserve to be here. Tell my story. And then he's forgotten about. There is extra pain when it comes to crushed hope, right? I was in prison. I was in a hopeless situation, and then I had hope, and then I was forgotten, right? Crushed hope. We're so adverse to this idea of crushed hope. Very often we put guards around our hearts when we feel like we're maybe wanting to get excited about something. And we put in all these like guards so we won't feel excited just in case. That's how adverse we can be about this idea of crushed hope. Well, he has this window of hope, Joseph does, and it's just taken away, and then the years go on. The months go on, the years go on, and he's just forgotten about. He's forgotten about. I feel like Joseph has had it all. He's had it all. He has every reason to be angry with life. He has every reason to be depressed. He has every reason to be cynical. He has every reason to be resentful, to give up on God, to give up on trying to do good, to give up. Just years go by and he waits. It's hard to wait. hard to be patient. But even more so when you feel stuck, when you're not where you want to be, when you're trapped, when you're wounded by people, you've been pushed down over and over again. And if you ever find yourself in that kind of a place, I hope you do not. But if you do, 2 words of advice, 2 things I've learned and 2 things I see throughout the pages of the Bible. First of all, advice number 1, never give up on the inside. Never give up on the inside. On the inside. And what I mean is, never let your heart give up hope for you and for your future. Never let your heart give up hope. I'll say this over and over again, hopefully all through my life. There is always hope for you and for your future. There's always hope for you because God is real and He cares. God is real and He loves you. God is real and He's paying attention. God is real and He is able to do anything. Anything. In any unforeseen moment. In any... you don't see it coming. Do you think Joseph had any idea the day that he woke up in prison unless God directly revealed it to him? Which it doesn't say that he did, so let's assume that he didn't. Do you think that he woke up on that morning thinking, today I get out of prison? Doubtful. It's probably like it's been year after year for Joseph. He wakes up that night, Pharaoh had a dream, but Joseph doesn't know that. Joseph doesn't know it's his day to get out. To him, he doesn't see it coming. The priests are called in to interpret Pharaoh's dream. Joseph is in prison. He doesn't know it. He doesn't know this is his day. He can't see it coming. The priest can't interpret this dream, which is just so shocking. He doesn't know that it's his day. The cupbearer is in the right place at the right time and finally remembers Joseph, whom he forgot about for years. This is years later now. Joseph doesn't know it's his day. He doesn't know it's his day until the guards show up and he gets to shave and he gets new clothes and he gets brought before Pharaoh to interpret this dream. This is one of those moments that happens in a day that Joseph cannot see coming. He can know it maybe, hopefully, by God that it's out there somewhere, someday, but he doesn't know on that day. God is able to change your life in unforeseen moments. Due to things that you don't see happening, but they're there. Don't give up hope on the inside. Don't give up on hope on the inside about being stuck, because anything can happen. Just because you don't see reason for hope doesn't mean it's not there. God can change your life and your circumstances in a single moment that you don't see coming. Put your hope in the Lord. Put your hope in the Lord. Put your hope in Jesus. And may you wait, and you may wait, and you may wait, and you may wait for year after year after year like Joseph does. But the Lord sees, and He can help you, and He can change your life in a single moment. That's number one. Number two, don't worry about the lost time. Don't worry about the lost time. When you feel stuck, the days are creeping by. You feel like you're never going to get there. Everybody else is thriving or doing their thing, and you're just stuck. I just want to remind you what God is able to do. That God is able to do everything that He desires for you, that He desires to do in your life and through your life. Time isn't the problem. He's able to change things and accelerate things. Think about Moses, right? Moses doesn't start until he's 80 years old, going back to lead the people out of the land. And God is able to give him strength and long life and health and all the energy he needs to accomplish everything he needs. God is able to lengthen your life to accomplish what He needs to accomplish. Also, He's able to accelerate things, make things grow much faster than you would have ever anticipated, or your career path much faster than is normal. So you may feel stuck, and you may feel like there's things aren't happening. You're like, oh, I'm wasting these days and this lost time. Well, when you serve a living and powerful and active God, it doesn't matter, because He's able to restore quicker than you would ever believe. He's able to elongate your life and your health and make up for any lost time. You can trust Him. Waiting isn't a waste unless you waste it with hopelessness. Waiting, there's some amazing things that can happen while you're waiting, but you can also wait it with faithless despair, with just feeling like there's no hope and just just wasting that time. Waiting can build faith. Waiting can build good theology as you remember what God is able to do and what God is like, and as you anchor your hope in God as opposed to your circumstances that you see with your eyes. Waiting can build character. It builds that inner heart stuff. It's brutal. Waiting is brutal, but it can do glorious things so that you are prepared on the inside for the things that God is going to rise you up to be about in the days ahead. There's always enough time. There's always enough time. That's number 2. Okay, so 2 years later, Joseph is brought before Pharaoh, and these things happen. I want to continue reading in chapter 41 here. Just reminding us where we left off in verse 32, and as we continue the story, it says, since the dream was given twice to Pharaoh, this is Joseph still speaking, it means that the matter has been determined by God, and he will carry it out soon. Verse 33, now let Pharaoh, this is Joseph's advice giving here. So now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man. Look up here. Let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this. Let him appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the harvest of the land of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. He's just laying out the plan. He's giving the plan away, right? He's like, this is what should be done, and appoint someone to do this. Let them gather all the excess food during these good years that are coming under Pharaoh's authority. Store the grain in the cities so that they may preserve it as food. The food will be a reserve for the land during the 7 years of famine that will take place in the land of Egypt. Then the country will not be wiped out by the famine. The proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find anyone like this, a man who has God's Spirit in him? So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as intelligent and wise as you are. No offense to everyone else on the planet. You will be over my house, and all my people will obey your commands. Only with regard to the throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, see, I am placing you over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him with fine linen garments, and placed a gold chain around his neck. He had Joseph ride in his second chariot, and servants called out before him, Abarek, which is short for abracadabra, and that's not true at all. Abarek, meaning maybe kneel or whatever. So I'm just going to keep reading. So he placed him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but no one will be able to raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt without your permission. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphanath-Paneah and gave him a wife, Asenath, a daughter of Potiphera, priest at On, or Iona, or Heliopolis. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph left Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout the land of Egypt. We'll stop there. There's an amazing similarity between Joseph and Daniel, who's going to be years later. Both of them are taken from their homeland somewhere around the age of 17. Both of them are spend time in prison. They both interpret king's dreams that no one else is able to interpret. All the wise men in all the land, they're both considered extraordinarily wise. They both have God's Spirit in them, and that's written in the passage. They're both appointed to the most senior leadership. In Joseph's called the vizier in the land of Egypt. He's that second rank, and same with Daniel as well. Just second under the king of Babylon there. There's so many things. Nebuchadnezzar changes Daniel's name to Belteshazzar. and then Pharaoh here changes Joseph's name to Zaphanath-Paneah. There's so many similarities. Joseph, his new name, kind of lets you know that Joseph's story has been told a little bit. Maybe from Potiphar or whatever. But Joseph's new name means something like, God said, let him live. God said, let him, or God has said he will live. That a declaration is taking place from God pertaining to this guy living. Now, maybe the reason is because maybe he knows the story that Joseph was supposed to die from his brothers. That was the plan. But instead, God said he will live, and so he's rescued out of that, and he's sold as a slave instead of dying. Maybe he knows the story in Potiphar's home with Potiphar's wife, and how that the accusation was there, and the result of that should have been execution, that he should be dying, that he should have been executed. But God has determined that this slave lived. This slave lived. That there's this declaration that Pharaoh seems to see over Joseph's life, that although a couple different times he should die, the statement from God of heaven is that, no, Joseph, he will live. God has said he will live. And friends, for all of you who have given your life to Jesus, you carry that same statement over your life. Zaphanath Paneah. God has said of you, you will live. You will live. Everyone who calls in the name of the Lord will be saved. Everyone who gives their life to Jesus will live. You're going to see in your life God rescuing you out of different troubles. But ultimately, on that day when you stand before God, the God who sees and knows everything, and your name is read out of the Lamb's book of life, God will be declaring life over you. And you have crossed, when you give your life to Jesus, you've crossed from death to life. No longer on the track of death. God has declared as you give your life to Jesus that you will live. Zaphanath Paneah. That hangs over all of you who have given your life to Jesus. That's Joseph's story. Joseph's story, a couple times at this moment, should have died. But instead, God has declared that he will live. Big story, big picture story here with Joseph. We saw him start as an arrogant-seeming youth in his home, possibly arrogantly telling his brothers about that they were going to bow down to him someday. But for the last 13 years, up to this moment, Joseph has been humbled. He's been humbled for 13 years. Humbled through life, humbled through slavery, humbled through betrayal and being lied about and just the disappointments of that, humbled through years of prison, humbled about being forgotten. He was rejected, hated, forgotten. All these things have humbled him over these last 13 years. And then, at the right time, God lifts him up. After 13 years of being humbled, God lifts him up at the right time. It reminds me of those powerful words which I hang on to all the time from 1 Peter chapter 5. In 1 Peter chapter 5, we read this. It says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, writes Peter, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that he may exalt you, or that he may lift you up at the proper time. Casting all your care on him, or your anxieties on him, or your worries on him. Casting all your care on him because he cares about you. He loves you. Friends, so many times in so many seasons, these are words that I hang on to, especially where it says, humble yourselves. Humble yourselves before it so that he will lift you up in the proper time. When the time is right, he will lift you up. And it's these words that I hold on to in my seasons of waiting. That they're not lost time. That my role is to just continue to humble myself before the Lord, to make sure that I'm not living proud and arrogant, and instead humbling myself before the Lord, knowing that God is trustworthy to lift me up in due time. How can I trust that? Because he cares about me. And he cares about you. God actually cares. And so I can lay down my worries. God, I'm not going to get there. This isn't going to happen. I'm afraid that I'm going to be stuck in this situation, in this painful situation forever. Or I'm going to stay in this situation that I don't want to be in forever. Forever. I think it's important to just see so clearly in this passage, no, if you don't humble yourself before God, well, then God's in a position of resisting. But if you do humble yourself, he pours out grace and help. You know how your heart position with God based on the kinds of things that you feel on the inside. The humble says, God, I need you. God, I need you. I need your help. I need your strength. I need your guidance. I need your assistance. The humble says, God, I need you. The arrogant say, the proud say, God, thank you. I got this. God, thank you. Just don't mess this up here. I've got a good thing going. That's the mindset of the proud. I don't need you. If you want to help, fine, but I've basically got that. That's the proud side. I encourage you, whether life's going good or whether your life's going challenging right now, check your heart. Check your heart. Are you in that humble posture? God, I need you. I need you. For me, many of those cares and worries and anxieties, I can just place them before God, and I practice this all the time, very often in the mornings, placing them down before God, and I can leave them there because he cares. And so many of my personal worries have to do with timings. I want this now. Is this ever going to happen? I feel like it's never going to happen. I can't see a way this is going to happen. And instead, I can just lay that down before the God who really does care and say, God, I trust that you love me. I trust that you see me. And I trust you with what worries me today. That's a humble posture, but it's also a strong biblical posture. This is what it is to cast our worries and our future on the Lord. Joseph, he has 13 years of learning this. Life continues to not go well with him, but then in a single moment, God lifts him up at the proper time. And if you humble yourselves before the Lord, he, according to Peter, will lift you up when the time is right. It's great words of hope. Great words of hope. If you've not given your life to Jesus, we're going to give you an opportunity for that in a few moments. But first, 3 challenges for us tonight. Challenge number 1, I encourage you to memorize these words that I've long memorized and held on to for many, many years. 1 Peter 5, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. Work on memorizing this passage. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that he may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your care upon him, or on him, because he cares about you. Challenge number 2, write down your worries on a piece of paper and place them in front of you. You're like, Brian, I've heard this challenge from you before. I'm just telling you something that I do all the time. All the time. Write your worries on a piece of paper, place them in front of you, and show them to the God who cares about you in prayer. These are my worries. Take them. I trust you with them. And thirdly, ask God to help you get unstuck. Ask him to help you and just show you his favor. Show you his favor. I guess I do want to add, since it's on my heart, don't be a grumbler. Don't be a grumbler. There's a lot in the Bible about not grumbling. Okay? Don't be grumbling. Just bring your request before the Lord and say, I'm stuck. Would you help me? In a humble posture, not a grumbling posture now. In a